Welcome to Lost Wilderness. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe. New scary stories are posted regularly, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from, whether you're driving, working, or alone at night. Now, let's begin. We were not supposed to go that deep on the first day. That had been the plan from the start, and for the first few hours, we actually stuck to it. The three of us had done enough abandoned mine work to know enthusiasm gets people killed faster than rotten supports do. We were experienced, careful, and boring in the exact ways that keep you alive underground. That was why local crews hired us when an old shaft needed surveying or mapping before being sealed, reopened, or written off as a collapse hazard. This one sat in the mountains several hours from the nearest town, hidden behind a maze of washed-out forest roads and switchbacks that no longer match most maps. It had been closed for decades after a cave-in killed 2 men and injured 3 more, then left alone long enough for rumors to grow over the gaps in the records. On paper, the job was simple. Enter the accessible upper works, map the intact drifts, assess structural stability, and confirm whether the lower network matched the old plans or had shifted beyond use. It was me, Ryan, and Cole, all in our 30s, all used to darkness, tight stone, and the kind of silence underground that makes your own breathing sound like trespassing. We widened the collapsed entrance enough to get in, dropped into the main drift, and started the usual rhythm: measure, mark, photograph, move. The air was cold but stable. The old timber in the upper sections looked rough but mostly sound. Water dripped somewhere deeper in small regular beats. Nothing felt immediately wrong until Ryan stopped near the first lower junction and held his light on the dust. There were footprints, bare footprints. Not old miner boots, not animal tracks, not anything random dragged in from the surface. Human feet, multiple sets, some large, some smaller, all barefoot, all recent enough that the edges had not softened in the powder. Cole said maybe another exploration crew had gotten in from another entrance, but that made no sense. No rope scars, no modern chalk marks, no fresh tool work. Just bare human prints heading down into the lower workings in single file and then scattering near the junction like people had stood there listening. We should have turned around right then. Any smart version of the day ends there. But the air was still good, the tunnel beyond still looked stable, and none of us wanted to be the first to say we were backing out because of footprints. So we followed the main slope into the lower drift. That was where the mine stopped feeling abandoned. A candle stub sat in a niche in the wall, half burned and fresh enough that a fingernail could still dent the wax. Farther on, a row of symbols had been painted across an old timber support in some dark reddish stain that looked too new against the aged black wood around it. Ryan didn't joke anymore after that. Neither did we. We kept going because the way back was still there, and because the lower chamber ahead opened wide enough that all 3 of us instinctively wanted one clear view before deciding to retreat. The chamber was huge, old extraction space with rotted ore sacks, broken carts, and black pools of standing water. Our lights moved over the walls, over fallen beams, over rusted rails half buried in slurry. Then Cole's beam caught movement on the far side near an old support frame. At first I thought it was 1 man, then 2, then 5. White painted faces, bare feet, dark clothing wrapped in layers, people standing in the shadows between old columns, perfectly still, watching us without surprise. One of them held a lantern turned low. Another had something long in both hands that looked like a rifle. None of them spoke. None of them ran. They just stood there in the mine chamber like we had stepped into the middle of something we were never meant to see. Then a voice came out of the dark from somewhere behind them, calm, male, certain. "You should not have come this far. You..." Nobody moved for 1 second after that because the human brain does strange things when reality becomes less safe, but more understandable at the same time. A cult living in the mine was insane, but at least it was human insanity. Then the man with the rifle stepped half a pace forward, and all three of us backed up instinctively. That broke whatever fragile stillness was holding the room together. Ryan said, "We're leaving." Not like a request, more like a declaration to himself, and grabbed Cole's shoulder hard enough to turn him. We started backing toward the slope we had just descended, lights still forward, trying not to trip over broken rails and debris while keeping the figures in sight. The people across the chamber didn't rush us immediately. That was what made it worse. They spread. Two peeled left behind old support columns. One dropped from sight near a lower cut. The rifle stayed centered. They knew the chamber. They knew where the exits were, and they were already positioning for them. Then the man with the rifle raised one hand and the lantern went dark. Half the chamber disappeared. We turned and ran. The slope drift back up toward the junction was narrow, slick, and timbered in sections with rotting braces that caught our packs and sleeves as we shoved past. Behind us came footsteps, more than I wanted, bare feet slapping wet stone, light but fast. No chanting, no screaming, none of the theatrical things movies give cults to make them feel less real. Just pursuit, organized and silent. We hit the junction and cut into the tighter side branch because the main drift was too open and the rifle would own it if they had another shooter waiting farther up. Bad choice for speed, good choice for forcing numbers to narrow. Ryan was in front, Cole in the middle, me in the back, which meant I was the one who saw the first follower appear in the branch entrance behind us. Young man, hollow face, paint across his cheeks and forehead, knife in one hand and no fear at all in his expression. I swung the rock hammer as he lunged through the pinch and caught his wrist hard enough to make the knife skitter away into the dark. He didn't even cry out, just came at me with the other hand until Ryan doubled back and put his shoulder into the guy's chest, driving him sideways into a rotten support. The beam snapped and the ceiling above us answered with a shower of dust and pebbles. We ran harder after that because now it wasn't just the cult behind us. It was the mine itself beginning to respond. The branch drifted left, then narrowed into an angled stope where the floor pitched toward an old loading room. We cut through it and found a crawl opening at the back that led into an unmapped passage. Cole yelled that they wouldn't fit through it in numbers. Ryan said, "Then move," and shoved him in first. I crawled after Cole while Ryan backed into the opening behind us, shining his lamp toward the stope. That was when the first gunshot hit stone. The round sparked off the wall above the crawl mouth and screamed away into the dark. Not warning, not bluff. The Colt had rifles, maybe only one, maybe more, and they were willing to use them underground. Ryan dropped flat and pulled himself into the crawl just as a second shot slammed into the stone lip where his helmet had been. The three of us pushed through tight rock on elbows and knees until the passage dog-legged hard right and opened into a cross-cut none of the old mine plans had shown. We finally stopped long enough to breathe, all three of us listening to the muffled sounds of movement behind. Cole whispered, "What the hell are they doing down here?" Ryan looked back toward the crawl and said, "Whatever it is, we walked into the center of it. Then from somewhere ahead in the unmapped dark, we saw the faint orange pulse of candlelight. That light changed the whole problem. Up to that point, escape had meant retracing until daylight. The cult behind us had made that impossible. But candlelight ahead meant the mine wasn't just occupied in one lower chamber. It was inhabited, spread through, structured. There were routes, rooms, and probably people in places the maps had never recorded. We killed our headlamps instantly and stood in pitch black for 2 seconds while our eyes tried to recover from nothing. Then Ryan whispered for us to move left along the wall toward the faint glow, not into it but around it if possible. The cross-cut widened into a ventilation chamber with old ladders collapsed down a central shaft and smaller passages branching off at different heights. The candlelight was coming from a room below the chamber lip on the right. We eased forward just enough to look down into it. There were maybe 10 people below. Men and women, barefoot, some with shaved heads, some with long hair braided back, all in layers of dark clothing stained with clay and soot. Symbols painted on the rock walls, candles fixed into drilled holes, old mine equipment repurposed into shelves, tables, sleeping pallets, a whole living space built into the underground. On a table near the center sat stacks of canned food, ammunition boxes, and hand-drawn mind maps spread under glass bottles used as weights. That was when the situation stopped being random madness and turned into something colder. These people weren't hiding down there for a week or two. They had been living in the mine long enough to build systems, storage, routes, security. One older man stood over the map table talking in a low voice to two others while a woman cleaned a rifle near the wall. Then somebody in the chamber behind us shouted once, distant but clear, and every head in the room below snapped upward at the same time. So much for sneaking past. Ryan pulled back first, and the three of us moved fast, cutting away from the chamber into the highest passage we could reach without ropes. Shouts broke out below us. The candles threw moving light over the walls. Somewhere behind, a whistle blew once, then again from farther off in answer. They were communicating through the mine. Cole whispered, "They're hurting us." He was right. Every route we took seemed to funnel us into tighter, older parts of the workings, where support beams rotted thinner and the ceilings lowered. They knew exactly which passages to pressure and which to leave open, so we would choose them ourselves. We reached a dead equipment alcove at the end of one drift and almost died there. One man came at us from the left with a pick handle, another from the right with a short shotgun, and only panic saved us. Ryan threw a coil of survey line into the shotgun man's face a split second before he fired. The blast shredded timber, wall rock, and half a rusted cart, but missed our bodies by inches. I hit the pick handle man with the rock hammer again. Not clean, not brave, just hard enough to take his knees. Cole grabbed the dropped shotgun while Ryan put the other man through a rotten partition wall and into the adjoining passage. We ran before either could recover. Now we had one shotgun, a handful of shells from the man's belt, and a mine that had stopped being a place and become an enemy. The drift ahead split at a collapsed powder room. Ryan made the call to go higher again because every lower route meant more people, more habitation, and more chance of being cut off. We climbed through broken framing and loose rock into an upper service tunnel not much wider than our shoulders. For the first time since the chamber, I felt the air change. Colder, moving, surface air. Maybe faint, maybe distant, but real. We had a chance. Then a voice came from the dark ahead of us, same calm male voice as before. "You will not leave with what you have seen." A flashlight clicked on at the far end of the tunnel and caught us full in the eyes. He had looped ahead. The man at the far end of the tunnel didn't rush us because he didn't need to. He stood there with the light held low and a pistol in his other hand, while footsteps and voices began filling in behind us through the passages we had just used. Boxed in, again. He looked like he could have been any man on the surface if you stripped away the soot, the pale paint, and the setting. Late 40s, maybe. Beard. Calm face. Not crazed. That was what made him worse than the others. He believed completely in whatever this underground life was, and in the fact that we had forfeited ours by seeing it. He told us to put down our packs and lie flat. Ryan answered by firing the stolen shotgun. The blast tore rock off the tunnel edge beside the man and sent him sideways out of the beam. We charged before anyone behind us could react. There is a point in every bad situation where planning ends and violence becomes the only route left. We hit that point all at once. Ryan took the lead. I was on his shoulder, Cole behind with the extra shells jammed into one fist. The tunnel mouth opened into a wider maintenance level, cut across a ventilation shaft, and the leader had backup there. Two more cult men rushing in from opposite sides. One had a pry bar, the other a revolver. Ryan hit the pry bar man first with the empty shotgun like a club, driving him into the rail. I went for the revolver arm and slammed it against the rock wall until the weapon went off into the ceiling and disappeared down the shaft. Cole came through behind us like fear had finally burned into something more useful, shoving the leader bodily into a timber brace that split under the impact. For a few seconds, the whole level dissolved into close, ugly fighting in dust and failing light. Nobody had room to swing properly. It was elbows, boots, rock, wood, hands on throats, bodies slamming into old supports. I don't remember making decisions in that fight. I remember fragments, blood on someone's teeth, Ryan taking a blow across the ribs and staying upright anyway, Cole firing the last shell of the shotgun almost point blank into the floor to make the closest two cultists break away from the edge of the shaft. Then I remember the sound the mine made, a deep crack from somewhere above, followed by a low rain of dirt and stone. The level we were on had taken too much punishment. The braces were failing. Ryan saw it a split second before I did and screamed for us to move. We bolted through the first side passage that angled upward, half climbing, half sliding over loose rubble, while behind us the maintenance level gave way in sections with a roar of collapsing timber, rock, and old iron. The cave-in didn't take the whole mine, but it took enough. Enough to seal the shaft room, enough to bury anyone still fighting there, enough to stop the pursuit. We kept climbing because none of us trusted a partial collapse underground. The air got colder, then fresher. Then the passage narrowed to a root-choked seam of stone that Ryan forced with both hands until daylight broke through in a blade across his face. We came out onto the mountainside through a hidden vent shaft masked by brush and tailings, crawling into real air with dirt in our mouths and the sound of the sealed mine settling beneath us like an animal going still. We didn't stop on the slope. We kept moving downslope, through brush and broken rock, until we hit the forest road and found enough signal on Ryan's phone to get a 911 call out. Deputies, rescue crews, and later state investigators went back with heavy equipment, maps, and more men than our little survey ever should have required. They found the entrance we had used, the lower chamber, the living quarters, the candle room, food stores, ammunition, altered maps, weapons, and signs of long-term habitation deep inside the mine. They also found evidence of a collapse in the upper levels, severe enough to block the route we had escaped through from below. Some bodies were recovered, others were not. The official story that followed was careful, vague, and full of language about extremist squatters and unstable historic works. That was fine by me. I didn't need the full truth printed anywhere. I had already lived it. What stays with me isn't even the violence. It's how normal the day felt at the start. Just another survey. Just another abandoned mine. Just another routine descent with men I trusted. Until one set of barefoot tracks in the dust led us deep enough to learn the mine had never really been empty at all. We hadn't found a forgotten place. We had stepped into a hidden world underground, and the people living in it decided almost immediately that the three of us were never supposed to leave alive. Thank you for spending your time with Lost Wilderness. If you enjoy slow, immersive horror stories, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Wherever you're listening from, have a safe night.